this is the bit, isn't it? That confuses me. It's like, did we choose to come here to get this sorted out, or is this just seems a little unfair, doesn't it? That you know, we seem to be here and there's this parasite messing up our experience.
And I know in my own life, the times that I've made major changes, it was like it became more painful not to change than to change. That was when I made big changes.
It's this. Hello. I think you pushed the wrong button, Bernie. Back we go. Now you're on mute. We can't even hear you. What are you doing?
Weird. Sorry. All right. Here we are. I don't know why that cut out. That was strange.
That was very unprofessional. Did you change?
Change nothing at all.
Hello, everyone. Let's forget that happened. We're all professional. Welcome. We have the amazing Michelle Gibson with us today. So welcome, Michelle. Welcome, Bernie. Welcome, everyone in chat.
Hi, everybody.
Yes, how are you going, Michelle?
I'm doing good, thanks. Excited to be here tonight.
So are we. It's been a little while between chats, and you've got lots of interesting stuff for us on Earth Grid and other sort of historical events, I guess, that you, and similarities. I guess that's sort of what you do, is you look for similarities, don't you? So if you don't know Michelle's work, guys, go and subscribe, give her a like, share it around, all that kind of stuff.
And links are in the description.
The links are in the description. Good. I wasn't sure. The links are in the description. So there you go. So, Bernie, got anything to say, or what should we do? Hand it over to Michelle?
We should hand it over to Michelle, as I believe she's got quite the presentation to show us, starting from your land over in Australia to the burnt badlands of Alberta, where I am, which I'm looking forward to this.
Yes, it's going to be a realm-wide roam. Try saying that 3 times.
Yeah, well, Bernie, since you're an expert on your Badlands, I'm going to let you do most of the talking on that one. But it's really important to point out because there's whole sections of continents that are just burned to a crisp, and we call them deserts and Badlands and whatnot. But they're highly suspect as not having been produced by the sun or whatever excuse of the day they want to give us for it.
Right.
But what I thought I'd do for the presentation tonight is cover some ground that we have commonalities in what we're doing. And I wanted to start, I'm all ready to go with that screen, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So one of the things that I started to do was research places that viewers suggested, because I was getting a lot of comments with suggestions, and it's truly a co-creative project because these are places I wouldn't look at otherwise, and then the synchronistic nature of what we do, things come back around, and I'm going to bring one of your subject matters in, Campbell, to compare. So in this example, a viewer left a comment regarding the 7 pillars in Miami County in Peru, Indiana, and that's just north of Indianapolis.
Oh.
And they're sacred by the Miami Nation, or to the Miami Nation of Indiana, and they own land across the river from this location and have their ceremonies. And then another viewer said that Campbell talked about Nawarla Gabarnmung.
Yes.
In one of his videos. And you want to talk a little bit about that, Campbell?
Yeah, that's an interesting formation up in the Northern Territory. It's classed as a cave, basically. They're just saying it's a natural formation that sort of, has been lived in and eroded away for thousands of years. But it looks like it's got pillars in it. And it also, one thing I noticed about it is that the floor's dirt, right? It looks like it's been filled in. And then in the background behind, when you look into the hills behind this structure, there's all these really interesting, doorways and things in the hills, things that look like old houses. So Yeah, I was just questioning,
Right.
is that natural or is that just man-made and very old and eroded?
It looks a lot like the Longu caves of China, which they do claim are man-made, and like Cappadocia in Turkey and Anatolia
Yeah.
in Turkey. Sorry, more like it's very similar.
It's interesting. We see that a lot with castles. You'll see these castles, like Edinburgh Castle, and it's a castle, right? And then in some countries, in the Middle East and around there, if something will be marked a castle, and it's literally just a hill. This melted, there's no castle there that we know of. But with our eyes, we're like, oh, okay, that was a castle. So it's interesting how they do this naming thing. It's all what do we call it? Obfuscation.
Mhm.
Obfuscation. That word. Obfuscation.
So in the course of this, I'm going to show another example in Turkey, but just wanted to point out that it's very similar.
It is.
And you've got, what looks like masonry up at the top. And then you've got actually very similar looking pillars. Some are skinny and some are thicker in both places.
Yeah, that's a very good point for the geological claim of erosion. It doesn't really work too well.
So that's the stock explanation for everything that we see is that it's natural and geological forces created it millions of years ago, or the ice age, advancing and retreating of glaciers caused it. But I've done a little bit of research into the origins of geology, and that's kind of like everything else. That's what they want us to believe. They don't want us to see infrastructure in front of us, or man-made infrastructure, because that just blows the narrative out of the water. And I know that there's some people that think these are like giants and things like that. And I know there's mud fossils. I understand that, but I don't see everything as a mud fossil. I think some things are, and I think there's a lot of terraformed infrastructure like this that are so old that we are conditioned to think that it's the result of natural forces, and in fact it was created.
Yeah.
100%.
They love their time, don't they? They love to push back time and give themselves, these millions of years. And it's like, well, anything can happen in a million years. Come on. And as far as, the melted, the titans, the trees, I think it's all of it. I think we're looking at multiple resets, and some things are older than others. I don't think you can say everything is definitely this. I think when you do that, you've just jumped into a box.
So the way I kind of see it is like in the sense of like the Hopi legends and like the 5 different ages of the sun, and that it was like the largest fractal of a fractal of a fractal, where we're essentially getting smaller each time, and that even the scientists or whatever the official narrative, it's admitted that it was megafauna and giant just that last cycle ago before, and that whatever that era would be, that was one more cycle of man or the sun or the evolution or humanity, and that sort of potential, right? And that in between that, there was a size of us where mountains were our habitat and our built homes, and something extremely cataclysm must have happened.
Right. And I kind of hold on to the idea from all of my research that there was a very long, continuous, advanced civilization from ancient times to relatively modern, that lasted a very, very long time. And then there was a massive reset. I also understand the idea of different worlds: first world, second world, third world, fourth world, fifth world. And one of the things that I believe is that Earth's history goes back way farther than what we're told, with intelligent,
right?
life, capable.
There was a time of Dinotopia, essentially, where whatever these massive reptiles or dinosaurs, whatever that you want to call them, dragons, but humanity like lived with them one-on-one sort of thing, and that like we've been alongside many times over.
Mm.
You know, and the other point is that we've been misinformed and confused and gaslighted and, you know, taught incorrect information so we wouldn't know the truth for so long that, you know, it's only now, like with the internet and other resources, that we can start putting our different pieces of the puzzle together. Because I know I wouldn't be able to do, you know, 75% of my research without the internet. There's
Mm.
quite a bit that I did by going to places. You know, I have pictures from that, but, you know, with all the different places that I've looked at without the internet, I would not have been able to do that. So
Mm.
it's, you know, it brings things together, and then we can start sorting through everything. But there's more to this that I want to share. You know, so I talked about the different size pillars. You know, again, it looks like masonry. This is what it looks like inside Noir-Barnung.
Northern Territory, yeah.
And then you have another interesting connection, because I started coming across people who identified as lost tribes of Israel all over the
Reuben.
world. And I have found information on the internet that the Australian Aborigines identified as the tribe of Reuben.
No,
Really?
that's
Fascinating.
wow.
Okay. And then up here, it's hard to read, but it says evidence of miseducation. You know, they just kicked the original people of the earth back to the Stone Age and took credit for everything.
Yeah.
But what else is interesting is that the Seminole Indians in Florida also identify as the tribe of Reuben, and they're considered to be originally from Florida. Okay, so you've got the same colors here, right?
Yeah.
As the
Nice.
Aboriginal flag.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Wow, look at that. Have you seen much of Old World
Old World
Florida's
Florida?
work, Dr. Luongo? I've been talking to him a bit and telling him that I need to get you two together, so we'll have to make that happen at some point.
In high
too.
demand, Michelle.
Okay.
We'll have to have the both of you back on here for the next AutoDidactic Alchemist.
So the Seminoles, do you see them as Moors?
Yeah, Washita Moors. I mean, they did a number on everything, so we wouldn't have a clue as to
I'm
what.
just amazed at, like, how do they get so much done? Like, but yeah, I guess that's for future conversations.
Yes, it's everything was fully developed and advanced, and they did something, and then they came in and they took everything over, and they had these wars, and, you know, killed a lot of people, and said we did this, and that's what happened. But the original builders were the original peoples. So the Seminole Wars took place between 1816 and 1858. And then the Seminoles were also relocated out west, like the Cherokee, that, you know, the Trail of Tears, the best known, but there were several Trails of Tears. The Creek Indians, the Chickasaw, the Seminole, and the Choctaw. So they were forcibly removed to Oklahoma Territory and, you know, kicked off their lands, you know, ostensibly by treaty, but you know how that goes.
Yeah, scam.
And some Seminoles remained in different places. Okay, so their lands, I don't know if I might have it here. Okay, so their lands they have several reservation lands. One is down here in the Everglades. So there's 6 Seminole reservations today. One outside of Tampa, one here in Immokalee, Hollywood, Big Cypress, Fort Pierce, and Brighton. This is all Everglades. So Miami, Florida is here, and this is Highway 41. It starts here. And what's interesting about Highway 41 is that it goes all the way up to Copper Harbor at the tip of the Keweenaw Peninsula in Michigan. So all the way up here, and then you have Miami's all along the way.
What
You
are
have
the
you have Miami's in Indiana and in other places as well. They're in Oklahoma. It's more than just Miami, Florida,
Wow.
which is the best known. So it's just really interesting, the connections that you can think about with this information, because from my perspective, the original tribes of Israel were laid out according to sacred geometry all over the earth. And so there's like 12 tribes, right? Or however
Yeah.
many, however that works. And there's different representatives of each tribe in different places. And it's just something to think about. This is what I found in my research, and I find it very interesting.
So
And
with
again,
the
just to mention, the people that hold the sacred land of the 7 pillars in Peru, again, are the Miami Nation.
so wow, what does Miami mean?
like how many coincidences do you need in a row? And that you've also done like this study and found the Salem and how there's 7 Salems in a row as well. And like, why are there just
And that was
please
actually a suggestion from somebody that's
Much,
talked
yeah.
about the 7 Salems, and then I started looking into it, and it was really interesting. Found a lot of information doing that. That it's just a whole nother, takes everything to a whole nother level, because everything was perfectly aligned, not only on Earth, but in heaven. So there are these eclipse paths that these cities are in perfect alignment.
right?
And the 7 Salem solar eclipse was in 2017. And then there's another eclipse coming from the other direction in 2024 that goes through 9 Salems. And I got that information from somebody else. And they both cross at Carbondale, Illinois. Both paths
Okay.
cross. It's like they're,
So what date is this that they cross? Because I
Yeah.
guarantee that is a huge, like, occultic, esoteric energy point event.
sure,
Something will be
it
going
is.
on
But keep in mind that these are ancient people that have built this.
there. Yeah,
And
it's off the
energies.
ancient grid of 100%. And like for those that haven't seen Michelle's original 7 Salem's video, like it blows your mind, like the alignments and all of that. And like I was just thinking that as you're saying it, that's like no, and now there's another one of another 9 of them still to come that you just found out about, and that they're going to intersect.
And they intersect at Giant City State Park, which is south of Carbondale, Illinois, in Wakanda. Makanda.
I was like,
Makanda, Illinois.
Wakanda?
But it sounds like Wakanda. It's Makanda, Illinois.
Giant city.
Right? Like if ever there was a time where a giant might reach out of the ground.
So
Wow.
I wanted to share that set of data that I found. Again, something to think about. It's not what we're taught. And you have to learn to read between the lines doing this.
Are there any connections between the Seminoles and India?
Well, if what I believe is true, then yeah, there's tribes of Israel in India.
Because are you aware of the language connection between Australian natives and I think it's northern, what's it called? Tamil? Is it Tamil?
Yeah.
I had not heard of that before, but nothing surprises me at this point.
Because also, if you look at pictures, if you just look at the pictures of the people from northern Australia and northern India, or southern India, sorry, they're exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things. There's so much information, really, when you start looking at everything differently. Not enough time in the day.
It's like they had a jigsaw and they just messed it up and put it in the box and shook it around and kind of spread it back out on the table.
And even when I'm doing my research, there's so much more that I could talk about, but it's like, what do I do with this? where am I going to go with this? I got to stop and move on. I've made my point, but it's always just like, the tip of the iceberg in terms of what is available to find at any location.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
and
I'm
wherever
going to
you
show.
look, you'll find it.
Okay, let me show you another one here that's like that, and this is in Turkey, in Karain, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Karain, and it was said to have been a settlement 500,000 years ago. They've been excavating there since 1946. It's right in here on this map. Okay, so what's interesting is that it looks like, guess what?
Oh gosh.
And they're excavating this one.
And this particular one just happened to show up on my feed. I didn't know about it. I don't think anybody suggest. Somebody might have, but I think it just showed
Could
up
have
on
been
my
AI
feed.
for you, right? The AI synchronicity.
AI is helpful that way.
Exactly. It can have some good, but that they're excavating this one, and so the story's going, I believe, that it's above water. So how did a river make this happen, or erosion make this one happen that seems to be identical to all the others?
And this one, I think there is some water. So it's believed to go back 44,000 years as far as people living there. That's Nawar like a barn mine. So there's another picture of the site in Australia, and then again the one in Indiana, and then this is in Turkey. So there is some water there in the cave complex, and there's springs there. And then you have travertine there, which is a type of limestone, and you have these beautiful terraces in Pamukkale that are fairly well known. But again, they tell us that this is all natural, but look at how perfect that is.
And so many that look identical to this around the world. It's like those are the ultimate, what are they called? Something pools, infinity pools. Like those are the perfectly engineered infinity pools, and they look identical at a good 50 different spots around the world. They're just
So what do you think that is, Michelle? Like,
well, personally,
a building that's filled up, or
so I see all of that as man-made infrastructure.
just something to do with mining, maybe? It looks like some kind of vats or something, doesn't it? Like, because it looks like they are made to hold. They're not like domes that have collapsed or anything, I don't think.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of things that there's more terraforming of the earth going on from the original people and ancient builders, that they knew how to do things that we can't even imagine.
Yeah,
and they used alchemy. They they knew how to work with the elements. They had technologies we can't even conceive of, and they were able to do this. Now, saying that, I am of the belief that there are different there are different types of mud fossils and things going on, and I do want to mention Chad Williams on Deeper Conversations with Chad, and he did 2 videos not too long ago. One was called Mother Earth, Ley Lines, Meridians, and Giant Trees, and then another one was called Mother Earth, Amusement Parks, Asylums, and the Old World.
Ooh,
and
what was his name?
And so he's got those 2 videos up, and I watched them, and I was astonished by the fact that we were finding the same things, even though we come from a different perspective. So this weekend, he's premiering 2 parts of a conversation that he and I had about our findings and, the
Nice.
common ground that we found, because there's amazing correlations with the giant trees and the energy grid. And that was the biggest takeaway for me, is that trees are part of this energy grid.
True. Well, I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, doesn't it? We've just been looking into electroculture recently. We're sort of starting to go down that path a bit. And so that kind of ties in that plants grow better when they're in the right energy fields. So, of course, the biggest trees would be on the best energy points. But I was going to say before, the main problem we have is we're looking at technology we don't understand. We're looking through, our lens of technology is physical and electric and electronics and all this stuff, where they were looking at, you know, fields and natural energies and all this kind of stuff. So, well, we're getting there. We're slowly rediscovering.
So he and I have a premiere on his channel, Deeper Conversations with Chad, this weekend.
Deeper Conversations with
Chad at 2 p.m. Pacific time. And it's in 2 parts. And the first part, we talk about the giant trees and so forth. And in the second part, we talk about the area around Derbyshire in England and Birmingham, and also the Derwent River Valley. And that was the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. And also talk about...
Sorry, where's that?
It's in central England.
Oh, because, you know, there's a Derwent Valley. There's a Derwent in Tasmania.
No coincidences, I'm sure. And so anyway, that's premiering this weekend, Saturday, I think Saturday and Sunday at 2 p.m. 2 parts.
Nice. Okay. Just putting
but I noticed, Campbell, that you did something not too long ago on that whole idea of giant trees and infrastructure, and this is arising independently. I mean, I was just looking on your channel this morning, and I saw that, and it's, you know, it kind of got some resonances with what we were talking about in our interview, but it's completely independently. You know, he's doing the research he's guided to, and I'm doing the research I'm guided to. Yeah. I watch his stuff, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm finding the same things.
Yeah, so we're finding that so much now. All these little people out there on their own, and they're doing this. We're all doing the same stuff, really. So it's good. We've been connecting to heaps of other researchers too recently, which is awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Edna.
And then I also noticed that you have a video about Admiralty law on your channel. I think it's AutoDidactic 2.
The second one, yeah.
And just last night, Stephanie McPeak-Peterson uploaded a fantastic decode of Admiralty law disclosure in her video called Admiralty Law on Prime Time. And it's a decode of The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, which was a 1960s sitcom.
Yeah. I remember that.
And it's wonderful. So I highly recommend that you go look at Stephanie's channel, and all of her videos are great. The one, it just hits.
So what was that name again? Stephanie?
It's Stephanie McPeak-Peterson. With an S-E-N at the end. And she put that up last night, and I watched it, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's right in there.
Don't you just love this, like the quickening of synchronicities and the amount of parallel information and verification of the research discoveries, and just everything starting to line up in undeniable manners.
It is. This is the thing, you know, like we're getting all this, everything's bad, look what the government's doing, oh my God, now the banks are collapsing, all this. But it's really just distraction. Like if you look at what's really going on, there is so much good going on, so much good information, you know, new discoveries, inventions, everyone's linking up. There's a ton of live events are suddenly just popping up everywhere, so people are starting to get back and connect. So, yeah, I think it's all good. Stephanie Peterson is in the chat. There we go. Hello, Stephanie. I just put the link for your latest video in the chat. Everyone go check her out, give her a like and a subscribe and all that good stuff.
Oh, you did it just as I did it again, too. That's hilarious.
Did you? Oh, my God. Stop spamming the chat.
The link twice at the same time. Now it's a race because we haven't shared Michelle's channel yet in the live chat. So we're a half hour in. I think that's the next one.
Oh, there you go. Hippie's done it. And the good thing is when she does it, only one post. Only one message. not. Anyway, Michelle, you were saying.
I don't know. I said so many things. So I just wanted to share it. I mean, it just really feels like maybe we've hit critical mass or something, and the ripple effect is there, and people are just getting guidance to do these things independently, but it all comes together and it validates what everybody else is saying, and that the veil is truly coming down because we can finally see what's really been going on, and
Exactly.
thankfully for this community, and this YT venue might have its frustrations, but it's still a very powerful tool. And
Well, this is it. I mean, it is, and it frustrates the crap out of me. But I mean, I've always said, if we can use their tools against them, we should. So that's where we are.
And that we don't need to burn down the old system and like start from the ashes. We need to just use the current infrastructure and to use it for the benefit of good and for betterment of all and a more sustainable future, and just accelerate the process over. And that seems what's starting to happen now, and that people are starting to use the inertia and energy of what we have in place to transfer over to this new reality and this new era, because it is a new age essentially that we're going into, and that it's accelerating and it's happening, and we're reaching, like you said, Michelle, this critical mass, that inflection point, that it's all coming together at once, and that I suspect that it might happen as like AI reaches sentient ships, that maybe also humanity hopefully will get this like 5D reality and evolution or upgrade. But we definitely don't want to drop back down to the Stone Age. And
no, it's like all these communes, man. Back in the 90s, I went on a few, and it's like all these hippies, yeah, woohoo, and they're sitting in the mud. And I'm like, I'm not going to sit in the mud. I'm going, taking the best stuff and going forward. And someone asked if Michelle had an Insta. Do you have Insta? I don't think Instagram, no. But so YouTube and Unguru Your Life.
No, just YouTube.
No,
And
no Unguru anymore?
No.
Do you still have
YouTube,
Unguru?
No. So YouTube and Patreon, and my website is piercingtheveilofillusion.com.
Piercing the Veil of Illusion. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Sorry. We'll delete that.
And I'm not live on this broadcast, but I have a link for it on my in my community section.
Yeah, cool. So get out and check out her website. There's if you haven't seen Michelle, like, there's so much research, you've got to go and check it all out. Really good stuff. Connecting the dots. I mean, that's what it is, right? It's connecting the dots.
It's connecting the dots.
Mm.
And then also, if you think about what good television and movies could have done if it had been truly for upliftment.
Oh man, I used to sit there when I was literally like 8 years old, going, "What is this crap? And why aren't they teaching me something useful?" It could have been so good, and the internet.
Right. So that's something that, you hear people say, we are the news now. And that's a lot of people. I mean, that's this community, that's, citizen journalists, people don't trust the MSM anymore. And also, there was another aspect to that, which is important. And we just get out and put it out. They've lost control of the narrative. That's what I was trying to think.
Yeah,
exactly right. And they really have, and the lockdowns really forced that and caused that now. And now that everything's reopening, that we have to take back reality by force and acknowledge that the narrative has lost on all levels, and just accelerate pumping these different information and mediums out there. And that we do see, like, trending on all these other social media sites, a lot of it, and sadly half of it's mixed with AI footage, but the other half is real disclosure, but that it's trending like no other. And thank you, Atlantis is found. Great show, love your guests. Can't wait to have longer interview to answer you and Campbell's great questions. That is Dick Tracy from the other day. Atlantis is found. He also had some very interesting finds on Google Earth. Sorry, Michelle, please continue.
No, I was just going to say that, you know, when the mainstream media just doubles down on the same old stuff, you know, and people can see past it now, and they can't stop. They can't stop what they're saying. They have to just keep pushing that agenda, and people are over that. They figured it out.
To their detriment. Yeah, we were discussing it before we went live that they just can't help. They just keep pushing harder and harder, and people are like, don't do this, we're not interested, and so they push harder again, and it just wakes more people up.
Exactly. So let me talk about there's a section of starports and lighthouses and so forth that I want to go through, but before we do that, I'm going to share my screen one more time, but I'm heading into BurnEye.
You can share it as many times as you want or need.
BurnEye is part of the world, and that's the Drumheller Badlands. And you mentioned BurnEye, the Cappadocia, and this place looks a lot like Cappadocia.
Yes, it does, and I've walked through those several times, and I'm going to be going back there again, boots on the ground, the spring and summer a few times. Oh my God, huge support, Red Cap.
Oh my God, Red.
Take my money before the banks lose it. I love Michelle Gibson, and you and Cam, love and life to chat as well. Bless your souls. Thank you
very much.
Yeah, so one thing I've noticed, so Drumheller is world famous for the Royal Tyrrell Museum of dinosaur bones, and it's like I myself have collected a lot of fossils out in the Badlands there, and like whether you believe in dinosaurs or whether they're dragons, there was some sort of gigantic reptiles that existed and that they're found there, and that then the town of Drumheller itself, every backyard has these what look like giant mounds that seem to all be coordinately aligned, and these flat tops, and identical to the pyramid mounds of the Midwest US everywhere. So I'm going to be taking the drone out to get some better footage of that, trying to find that. And then I know I've told this story a few times, but I swear on my life, I experienced a petrodactyl or pterodactyl or some sort of thunderbird thing that flew over at 3:30 in the morning when I was outside having a cigarette in my friend's backyard that lives in Drumheller in the valley, and that I had my laser pointer on me at the time, and I like beamed it, and it was like at least 1,000 feet up, yet it blocked out the moon temporarily, and you could hear it like almost like a fighter jet. And like when how fast it was going, and when I got it with the laser, it dipped down in a way, and like once again, I thought of it, and the hair on your back goes up because it's like your prey, that moment of prey, and it's
lucky you're not an elephant, man. Those birds used to carry elephants away.
Right? Like it was something giant that flew over in the middle of the night, and I got the instinct that I was being hunted, and like ask Amber the next time you see her like about that night, and like her own words, what the state she saw me in after.
You're gonna have to do a BurnEye like creepy story, I think, on that. They're very interesting pillars, like because some of them look like they got remnants of a roof, right? Sort of on the top.
So these are called hoodoos, HOODOOS.
Hoodoos in Alberta and fairy chimneys in Cappadocia, correct?
Okay, so let's look at Cappadocia or whatever, Cappadocia, and you find the same kind of, little different, but same idea. And I kind of think those are like early antenna or some kind of melted infrastructure or something.
Yeah.
But the resetters like to give them cutesy kind of names. So,
Yeah, we
know,
can imagine. Some of
nature
them
did
also.
this, but those types of things are all over, and I have done some research on that. I can't think of the video right off the top of my head that I would pull it off in, but I have talked about that.
Because there's a lot that
And-
also look like mushrooms, isn't there? Like they got the big sort of top on them.
But they're all found in the Badlands, these designated Badlands, and that the reoccurring theme of these, especially North America and also Australia, Michelle, as you're pointing out, there are all these scarred, quote unquote, Badlands areas that they're called. And then somehow these Badlands are also usually national parks. And then simultaneously, they seem to have the wildest ruins and what appear to be these leftover remnant civilization catastrophism.
Right. And, there's some interesting comments that are being made about what they look like. And yeah, they do. I mean, but the thing is, so if you look at some of them as a phallus, for example, we have looked at that as a kind of a dirty sexual symbol, right? But what if it's, the male energy, there's male and female energy. What if it has to do with male energy? I kind of think
mushrooms. They're not having dirty thoughts when they're doing it. They're just reproducing as well, right?
It's some kind of universal energy shape with a particular function. And then I think those became onion domes later on. So if you look at the shape of onion domes, it's really kind of similar, but again, it's part of the shapes on the grid system. Say the same thing about obelisks.
Inversely, like could they be plasma destroyed or eroded former onion dome surviving remnants too, potentially?
How big are they?
Possibly. I think of them as early versions of it, and things just evolved over time.
More natural to then mimic of nature sort of thing.
Right, but there was a purpose for the shape.
Like masculine energy. Is that
and then they, and that would be like, I mean, you can find feminine energy with, feminine.
Feminine. Are we allowed to say that word, Michelle, though? Come on, you might get picked off.
So you can find a corresponding shape for feminine energy as well. So
yes, I was just thinking of all the step wells in India.
And I'm gonna pull up something here real quick that I didn't have pulled up, but it's a really good example of
and shout out Gerald that might have found more pyramids, and by all means, Michelle, please do.
Okay, so I want to share this particular picture of Chimney Rock in Colorado, and it looks like a pyramid with a phallus on top.
Right?
And that's not the only one. There's other examples in other places of the same
How close
idea.
does it almost look to that eroded off? Okay. Pretty similar.
So, would you tie fireplaces and chimneys into this kind of similar energy tech?
Potentially, because there's a lot of places, at least in the States and probably in other places, where this type of formation is called chimney rock. But then you also have a chimney rock, like in North Carolina, where it's just the phallus. It looks like a phallus.
Just a giant phallus.
So,
I'm just literally be maybe.
They could rename it Joe Biden.
But I think it's an important energy kind of thing that we're talking about. And we've just, everything has just been so taken down in consciousness. Things that were really sacred that aren't sacred because it's all been, turned into
the geometry of it because there was an energetic purpose and structure behind it, essentially.
Think of the word sacred. Sacred, the sacrum, right? The sacral bone. That's where, hello, women, create life from. Are you thinking that these are man-made, or that these are sort of, 3D cymatic of the Earth kind of thing?
I think they're man-made.
Yep.
And again, I can give more examples than these. These are the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. So that's what hoodoos are. That's what they remind me of, are these phallus shapes. I agree. I mean, there's a couple of different
100%.
mushrooms and other things, but they're clearly were in a place that's ruined.
Yes.
Where they are now is just ruined, and you can't even tell what was there before.
Have you noticed, is there a tie for nuclear testing in these places?
Nothing would surprise me along those lines, because they've really misused the grid.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few places it looks like they may have gone out and done nuclear tests, right? Which that could have just been destroying old cities.
So there's one more place that I want to talk about, and I'm going to turn it over to BurnEye, because it's his part of the world and he probably has more to add to it. But one place that I almost got to, I've been on the Alaska Highway 3 times in my life, going up there to check it out and moving up there and then leaving. And I saw the name of this head smashed in buffalo jump place. I thought, oh, that sounds really cool. I'd love to go there, in Alberta. And it's not too far from where BurnEye lives. And at the time that I was going through that part of the world, I wasn't in tune with any of this information. But as I'm looking at these pictures now, I can see like a wall, an ancient wall.
Yes. Oh my God. Thank you for bringing this up, because
before anyone asks, yes, we are going to talk.
There's actually so many what look like giant megalithic sites down in that area, and I drive through this area all the time. And it's part of the Alberta curriculum in junior high to do a field trip to this site, and that was like the last time I was there. And it's like, oh, cool, the buffalo go over this and that. But now that you're pointing this out, that's definitely looking like a megalithic wall there. Because there's so many similar ones that are off the highway, you can see it, but they're all on private ranch land that you're not allowed to go on, that I've wanted to investigate for years. And now there's this place right there that is open to me. So I will 100% be doing an episode there.
What the hell? Who named it Head Smashed in Buffalo Joe? I mean, and that's where they send all the kids.
Campbell is that the native indigenous would dress up in wolf clothing and hunt and herd the buffalo off the cliff, and then the entire herd, they do an annual hunt, and that it was enough to like feed the tribes for a year, sort of thing. And that's what it was used for.
I guess that's I mean, and then they send all the kids there, right, at school, like to literally a place where all this death and destruction's going on. I mean, it's just insane.
And to not notice the giant wall that is there as you're growing up, being like, I've been there. I didn't see anything, but like now that you pointed that out, I am going back there. And that's going to be added to Alberta's mysterious megaliths.
Right.
Wow.
And, so here's what they do. And it's the same thing with the Gosford glyphs in Australia. They say, look at these glyphs. They don't say, look at this ancient structure that's here.
No.
And the buffaloes. Let's talk about the buffalo going over the edge of this and not bring any attention to the ancient masonry. The Heavener runestone in Heavener, Oklahoma is the same way. Everybody talks about the runestone. They put this wooden shelter around a gigantic stone with runes on it. And it sits in this ancient infrastructure. And that was what I noticed when I was there.
Okay, everyone's looking at what's in the middle.
And that was what, and they talk about Vikings in Oklahoma. But that was a realization when I first started waking up to all of this. I was living in Oklahoma at the time and went there, and I saw walls and all kinds of stone infrastructure. But that's how they hide. How they hide it is
in plain sight.
draw your attention to something else,
Yeah.
and they want the narrative to support what they're telling us about these ancient hunter-gatherers and all this other stuff.
Yeah, well, it's almost, if you don't put conscious attention on it, your subconscious sort of fills the story in with the narrative, right, with what you've been told. And you just go, oh, yeah, cool. Clearly, that must be a natural geological rock formation. Cool. Created over millions of years.
So that's their favorite mode of cover-up of the history. I mean, how are they going to hide this civilization in plain sight? Well, they managed to do it. But again, now that we've got other sources of information, we can start tearing that narrative apart, which is what my work has turned into.
Yes, I mean, it's kind of what all of our work is turns into sooner or later. You start off with buildings or forts or a bit of weird history, and then you suddenly everything just collapses, and you realize everything is just a charade, right? It's just all a narrative.
Right. Well, it looks like Bernie's on the phone. I'm about ready to turn it over to him to talk about
Bernie. All right,
Badlands, the
just
Buffalo Jump.
Just your opinion, obviously, but what do you think happened? Like you sort of mentioned before that you think it's a continuous civilization, high frequency, whatever we want to say, and something like I'm of the opinion that we've already been invaded. Like, what's your opinion?
Colonization, for sure. I mean, I think there was a deliberately caused cataclysm, and that the controllers were shovel ready to start digging enough infrastructure out to restart civilization. They took control of all the resources and everything else, the educational system. They've had this plan, the New World Order plan, for a long time, and they've just been implementing their evil plans that are anti-human.
Well, and this is the biggest thing for me, and this is what I sort of noticed, many moons ago, is they're not us, and it doesn't really matter what kind of label you want to put on it. The fact of the matter is they're not us. They don't act like us. They don't have our ethics. They don't want the same out of life, and they definitely don't like us.
No, they don't.
Yeah,
they need us, but they hate us.
Yeah.
And that's what the whole
definitely
transhumanism thing is about, is turning us into cyborgs and harvesting our energy and taking our souls so they can live forever and we can live forever in misery.
Yeah, exactly right. Because they're literally
parasites. We have the same power. We take the power back. We do not surrender it.
We have a lot more power, Bernie, than them. Their only power is, as a parasite, is to suck other people's power, where we can create our own.
Right. So when you start to wake up to that, and that seems to be what's happening more and more, is it's just becoming more obvious that something's really wrong.
It's becoming more comical by the day. I mean, come on, what's going on out there?
Or disturbing by the day.
Yeah, exactly right. It's waking people up, but that's what Armageddon is, right? Lifting the veil. And how do you wake people up and lift the veil? You show them, put it in their face, what's going on, and that's exactly what's happening.
Another word is apocalypse.
Apocalypse. I think that's the word I was actually meant to say. What did I say? Armageddon. Yeah,
starts with an A.
Apocalypse. Yes, definitely apocalypse.
Yeah.
All right, so, Bernie.
What do you have to say, Bernie?
Apocalypse.
Yeah. Oh, I like Virginia.
I'm going to finally be exploring the Medicine Hat Badland Guardians in May this year, and verifying on the ground that these are ancient structures, and the megalithic lines, what Farham has deciphered, the earthworks that make these ancient sites all make sense, and the alignments connecting them with his geoglyphs, so that there's these 5 geoglyph sites here in the Medicine Hat Badlands. Once again, a Badlands area, and right in the center of it, what seems to be this leftover macro terraformed society and remnants. and so this is the one site, and that's a road up to an oil derrick right in the middle there. So we're planning on doing a 2 or 3 day weekend over there where we'll stay in Medicine Hat at a Rent Out a Motel YouTube community meetup. There's a few people already in the community going to join us there, and then do a couple of day trips out here, and we'll see if we're actually legally able to camp out there. We might camp out for a night, but at the very least, we'll know we can drive up to where that oil derrick is, sort of thing. And it's these lines, these earthen mound earthworks that are the key evidence of all of these ancient lines, just like the Nazca lines are another part of it. And that they map out all the other ancient sites, but that it's a huge part of all the alignment research that you found, Michelle. And yeah, so here's the geoglyph site 4 right on the tip of the main feature there of the Olmec head, the Viking head, and the Western Plains Aboriginal warrior head. And that, sorry, oh no, it's the other one over. So this place right here, for anybody that wants to come, that's Western Canada, Western, Northwestern US, feel free to get a hold of us. And that's his book. I got Ancient Signposts. This is actually the one that explains Fairham's model behind all of the geoglyphing and the mathematics of how his system of geoglyphology works out. But what I was wanting to show even more so is that it also connects to all of the pyramids of the old world into this system too, where here he's dating it at that age just due to the other sites that are built into it and when they appeared and when they stop appearing, sort of thing. But these are the Bosnian pyramids, and that when you take the side angles in the face angle lengths and apply it to his geoglyphology, it also maps out to all of these old ancient sacred sites, so that we can see that it's from the pyramid culture all the way down to the different indigenous cultures of the past macro civilization. And then here he's showing that the equilateral triangle of the 3 peaks of this of the Bosnian pyramids, also the same mathematical angles equivalent map out to even more specific sites and whatnot, to the point of beyond coincidence. It's all purposeful building. But then the update being that all of these old world cities as well, these citadel cities or these star fort cities, the main streets from the center cardinal points or the center town square points and central cathedrals also apparently map out to the same geoglyphology mapping. This one being what the streets of Moscow map out to, of the old city, also map out specifically the points of Russia's territory. And that this is the star fort, or the bastion fort, that was built on top of the pyramid only supposedly a couple or few hundred years ago, and that he's also showing it's the updated geoglyphs from the most recent civilization doing the markings, the same ones that built the old cities like Moscow that was just shown, and that there's a whole new set of geoglyphs built into the 2 star forts. This one's on top of the pyramid of the moon, and that one is on top of the pyramid of the sun. That apparently also bastion forts fit into this same geoglyphology and alignments and ancient mapping cities or mappings of the world. And that whether it's the pre-cataclysmic mega pyramid civilizations like Yanaguni that was also apparently goes into his same geoglyphology, mapping out specifically the same territory that Japan controlled during the height of World War II. And yeah, so there's all the Badland alignments. I'm going to be going to this place, and that whether it's pyramids or Badlands or bastion forts or star forts, they all seem to be connected to this Earth grid macro technology of the ancients, and that the biggest Badlands of all that we're not allowed to actually go into are the Grand Canyon, and this is Isis Temple, which it's called Isis Temple. This is a new picture of it where you can literally see they've covered up that big cave entrance that was so there. It's also covered up. Did I load the picture? That's no. Oh, here we go. See, it used to be open, and that they had to go in and cover that cave up so that people, this is one of the only viewpoints that people are able to drive up to and see the Isis Temple, so they couldn't have a giant gaping entrance into one of these pyramids. But at the very top, it also seems to have that phallus shape, and that everywhere there's Badlands, there seems to be these macro giant ancient leftover pyramid cultures. And so this one, the Shiva Temple, the Isis Temple, and the Cheops Pyramid, that's literally the names of these three peaks in the Grand Canyon. And this is one of like the main points that you're able to go up and look to, and it's also the main entry point that people can book themselves. You can, I think it's only 300 people a year, maybe it's 500, maybe it's a little more, but something like that, to book a private ranger to hike into this little area, or you can raft through where you're not allowed to get out. But behind this, there's another 50 different of these pyramids and structures that they all have labeled with the different titles. And sorry, as I have to switch over profiles here, but to get to this one, this is the topographical maps of the Grand Canyon. And as you can see, the peaks of each of these pyramids or the structures, like the Isis Pyramid, which one is Isis Pyramid there? Which star? Sorry, I can't see it of great size. But Horus Temple, Tower of Ra, Osiris Temple. So Tower of Set is Betelgeuse. Isis Temple is Bellatrix. Cheops Pyramid is Mintica. Summer Butte is Rigel. Self O'Neill Butte. So each star in the entire Orion constellation and sky perfectly aligns to the peak of one of these leftover remnant pyramid or temple structures that all have these sacred names to them. And that it's like you have Horus Temple, Isis Temple, Tower of Set, Cheops Pyramid. There's also Temple of Jupiter, Temple of Apollo, the Ottoman Amphitheater, and Solomon's Temple as well as Shiva Temple, and I believe Buddha Pyramid, all within this area. And how can it possibly be that these Badlands just all have such massive alignments everywhere? And sorry,
and it's also was that was Grand Canyon. Now you're back in Canada. The Grand Canyon is at the tip of that massive, I guess it's a bastion, right? The Dutch synthers found.
Yes.
It's like half of the USA or something. It's like the whole west coast. But that's at the base of it, yeah.
And I know of another Orion in Arizona, at least one.
Yes, right. The larger one out of it too, that connects all of the cities and stuff.
Gary David has done work. If you look up the Orion Zone, I kind of live in the middle of it here in Arizona. So there's there's those two, and then there's all kinds of observatories here, including the Vatican Observatory in Arizona, but there's a number of them. And I don't get to places out of where I live very often, but there's a lot of dark sky communities, and if you get away from town, I mean, the night sky is just dazzling, bright, beautiful.
I could, right?
I just don't get it out at night
Get
often
enough, right?
I'll be right back, guys. If you want to have a look at, I've got all Google Earth set up, but I'll be back in a few minutes.
Okay, so this right here is another one where they're showing the Butte Fault, or what they're calling a Butte Fault, and it's white limestone, and then right behind it is this other red, they call it Sepoy group, but red sandstone. And what it really looks like is it's two giant ancient walls that used to be damming up the water behind it. And that what I suspect is that all of these peaks, everything that was in, you're seeing the water line of where the dams and docks would have been, and that this would have been a giant Lake Star Citadel city floating in amongst a massive inner sea or inner freshwater lake that they would have created out of it all, and now it's just desolate. And then, of course, the stories that there's civilization and caves and cities all throughout those areas. It's just so fascinating that they're all also named such things as Solomon's Temple.
Mm-hmm.
And then, for instance, one of the lucky places I got to go in my life and experience was Chichen Itza here. One time I got to go to, no, actually, I guess it was at Mexico twice, but one time on the Caribbean side, one time on the Pacific side. But I got to go here, and I got to experience the clap, where if you stand like right in the center of the field, this beam of energy like reflects off, hits the pyramid, and then it comes back, and like the sound wave, when it comes back at you, is exponentially more energy and hits you with more force than your original clap. It's quite the experience. And then also I got to be there and experience on the solstice, the winter solstice, of the dragon shadow moving down at the sunset of it, or the snake, sorry. And yeah, so these things right here, they're acknowledged pyramids and earthenwork all throughout the US, and then in Drumheller, Badlands, Canada, they're in every second citizen's backyard and just called natural formations.
Right. And that's what places like Teotihuacan in Mexico look like before they uncovered it.
Yeah.
So if they bothered to take
this place right here,
the earth layer off, it probably would see something that looks like that picture in Mexico.
And did I get the right one? I'm thinking. Oh no, sorry, that's not the one. But that is Teotihuacan.
Good.
I think I might have the picture of it before it was excavated. Maybe not.
Yeah. And it's fairly easy to find in a search if you look up historic pictures of Teotihuacan, looking like what you see in the States.
Yeah, exactly. Like looking like that.
Like that. Yeah.
I guess that's the Bosnian pyramid back in the day. But it kind of pretty much looks like that.
Yeah, same idea. Same idea.
Okay. Campbell takes off right as we needed him for the Google Earth. My goodness. What a guy. And did you have anything else you were wanting to cover tonight? I sadly... Oh, yes?
Yeah, I do have something else to cover. And Campbell was going to do the Google Earth. I'm not sure how reliable my internet is, and I don't want it to buffer the stream to show Google Earth, but I just wanted to show that there's, every continent has deserts on it. And, it's just very peculiar that, we're taught that it's time and sun and certain places on the earth, but when you really look at it, highly suspicious for something, whether a directed energy weapon or some kind of bomb or something. And I think there's probably a lot of potential causes for what took place, but the end result is there's places with dunes all over the earth, and the shape of the dune doesn't change, just the wind patterns around it, like there's something underneath them. And I just wanted to kind of go over some of those places.
Right.
Because living in Arizona, sorry. I was just going to say, living in Arizona, every time I fly in a plane, I look down and I just see all kinds of shapes in the desert. It's like,
yeah, right. And it's like, it's probably all buried past civilizations, especially if it's designated as Badlands, which most deserts are.
Well, shall we go back to that? Since
Campbell's
not back yet?
Sure.
Okay. I just wanted to show as quickly as I can. There's quite a bit of research in here, and I apologize because I'm going to have to scroll through quite a bit. So somebody had suggested, when I was starting to really look into the idea of circuit board Earth and electricity circuits and springs and that kind of thing, somebody had directed my attention to Saratoga Springs in New York. And I started this research when I was doing research for that. And I thought, well, I'll just put together what I already have, and that'll be a post and a video, and I'll, call it good. And what ended up happening was I stayed there quite a while because I ended up finding so much information, just starting up at the northern end of the Hudson River and going down to the New York Bay, that shows that this was a really powerful spot on the Earth grid. And, I definitely see star forts as repurposed infrastructure on the grid system, like a battery or something of that nature. And they're even called batteries, like artillery batteries, when they gave it a military purpose. But these star forts are all over the Earth, and they're typically found in pairs and clusters. But I was also finding springs and railroads and trolley car lines all up and down this, and lighthouses all up and down this particular river and then on into New York City. So like there's these two star forts historically at Crown Point in New York, and they give us the story. They were built by the French starting in 1734, Fort St. Frederick, and then the other one was built by the British, the one that's right there next to it. But right after the Revolutionary War, this fort was in ruins. So they built the fort and then they went into ruins. Typical story. And then there's this historic site today. So there's one fort and then there's the other fort here. So they're typically in at least pairs, sometimes clusters. And that's a definition of a battery. If you look it up, that's one of the definitions. This is where Fort Ticonderoga is. I'm just going down the Hudson River here.
Yeah.
And that one's fairly well known. And, they give us dates for when it was built. And then in Fort Ticonderoga's case, after 1781, it was allowed to fall into ruins. Again, not used for very long if it was a fort. And then as you keep going down, I mean, I came across a lot of star forts I didn't even know about, and the storylines behind them. All this in this one area, there's a lot of so-called forts. And then you even find in Hudson Falls, for example, you find the remnants of these places, earthworks in towns like this one in Port Edward, where there's a residential neighborhood, a sign to let us know that it was there. This plaque on this so-called boulder, and again, we're conditioned to see those as all natural, but I beg to differ. They're megalithic stones. And then you have places like this in Moreau, where it kind of looks like a star fort that's being harvested.
Yeah, that bottom where the arrow is, that looks exactly like a bastion or a cavalier, isn't it? We see a lot of that looks like they're mining them.
Right. And there's at least one other example, maybe more as I go through this. And I'm just going to go through it quickly because the whole thing is pretty long, but I want to make some points. So that this town, these two towns of Moreau and Hudson Falls are supposed to have been connected by this bridge that was built in 1906 by the Union Paper and Bag Company, since the company had plants in both places. 15 arch spans, roadway, sidewalk, and standard gauge railway going across this bridge that was built in 1906 by the Union Paper and Bag Company. And that it was closed to traffic in 1989 because it was structurally deficient.
Oh, looks like it's pretty good condition to me. And like you pointed out, there's always these supposed quarries, right, where the positions of the ancient star fort batteries and alignments are where they should be are.
Well, the best bit is, we built that bridge, before power tools, all this kind of stuff, but we don't know how to repair it.
Right. And then they demolished these things. A lot of this original infrastructure got torn down to be replaced by something substantially less high quality.
Energetically compliant.
So this is interesting. This sign for Fort Miller. Fort Miller, built by Colonel Miller.
Wow, one person.
In July of 1755.
It's always one person, isn't it?
Erected in 1940 by the State Education Department.
What?
State Indoctrination Department.
Did you see John Levi actually did a video and he showed this monument literally just out in the desert. There's nothing around it. It's just this monument. And it was to a guy who was it was an insignificant like mayor or something in 1903. And the story is they put up the monument to him in 1978. And no one knows his name or who he is. It's like, come on, guys. Really?
There's a lot of monuments to these guys.
We made monuments to people. We don't know who they are or what their story is. Okay.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
But we have to have some explanation for this, so this is what it's going to be.
Well, that's the thing, yeah. I think someone sort of stumbled across it in 1978 and they went, oh, crap. Give me a name. We need to slap a name on this.
It's like, what haven't we used yet?
Yeah.
So you keep going down and there's, all these forts and so forth, but there's also electric parks, amusement parks, and they don't exist anymore. This particular one in Kinderhook was the largest amusement park on the East Coast between Manhattan and Montreal during its run from 1901 to 1917. So that's right here. So we started up here and we're at Kinderhook, and it was created by the Albany and Hudson Railroad to increase ridership on weekends.
Of course it
And
was.
that it was closed, we're told, because in 1917, the popularity of automobiles no longer restricted people to rails and river steamer transportation.
Oh, so
World War-
literally it was just for the train fare. Like the electric park was insignificant. Like, what?
Right. World War I and high insurance premiums due to the number of trolley parks that had burned down.
Of course.
Okay, so that's one.
So I mean, it's like when you this and the World's Fairs, it's like there was the most electricity being used literally when it was brand new. It was everywhere. You know, all these lights, all these electric parks and everything, and it just doesn't make sense.
It's
And so
backwards. It literally doesn't make sense.
So what's significant is that these trolley parks were terminals of streetcar lines.
Yes.
And so to me, these played a significant part of the Earth grid system for the ancients, and that it was a very fun civilization, the original one. And then, you know, they were brought online just long enough to be useful for the controllers, and then they were destroyed. Is what it looks like.
Do you see them as actual, you know, amusement parks, or do you see them as maybe machinery? You think they're amusement parks?
Well, I think the amusement parks were I see it as recharging. So they sit on the terminals.
Interesting.
And these rides were there to, you know, for the public to enjoy. And I'm not thinking, you know, post reset. I'm thinking pre-reset. Yeah. This was an important part of the infrastructure. And I'll be giving more examples just in this one location in New York State. So you've got this trolley park number one, and then you've got all these lighthouses. This one's just below where the electric park was. And that in 1967, the governor of New York at the time, Nelson Rockefeller, who was a Rockefeller, a real one, established the Hudson River Valley Commission. And then the Coast Guard took over and leased them to nonprofit historical groups to preserve them. And I'm kind of thinking there's a lot more to the story about these lighthouses than what they tell us.
Yeah. I mean,
there has to be, because they're just so impossible, because to build the ones in the ocean were built like man-made islands. Like they had to build the islands to make them. Exactly. Where it's just too impossible for the time period.
Indeed. Yeah. Hello, Andreas. And it looks like they were built before the waters rose, right? Built on the land, and then the waters rose, and now they're in the middle of the ocean, because we've all seen the picture of that, you know, that big lighthouse with a wave that's literally crashing over the top of it. It's like, okay, so how'd you build it?
Yeah. There's, I think there's a whole bunch of about lighthouses that are kept under wraps and that they serve a much larger purpose. And there used to be, what do I think? I'll come to that. Okay, so here's another one. Looks very similar to this one here. And then you come to another lighthouse and amusement park in Kingston, New York. So you've got this amusement park built by a steamboat company and railroad, the guy that owned them. And it was supposed to be a steamboat landing for the Hudson River Day Line and a place where trains and
Oh, come back, Michelle.
Are you blocked? I couldn't hear.
Welcome, Andreas. How are you?
Oh, this is exciting. I just wanted to tune in to hear her talk about Fresnel lenses. And so researching Fresnel lenses in lighthouses. So I'm keen to hear what she has to say.
Ah, okay. The big glass discs.
Michelle, are you still there?
Michelle will be back. So tell us about Fresnel lenses.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't want to, take over, but I'll post the picture.
Back, just make sure you shut up.
Yeah. But looking at Fresnel lenses and lighthouses is interesting in and of itself, because these are these crazy, amazing pieces of glass that they actually chisel and they design in order to produce more light than would possibly be seen otherwise. And when you look at photophones, the idea of actually using a Fresnel lens for photophonic technology for communication, you can send an entire conversation through light because you can actually look at the disturbances of the waves, and you could send that much further. And this was invented actually 20 years before the telegram. Bell had patented the photophone 20 years before he patented the regular phone technology, the telegram technology.
These can literally be communication towers, just sending a message tower to tower.
Right. And when you think of Lord of the Rings, with the Lord of the Rings, there's that scene where they light the tower, or even in Mulan, right? They light the tower and someone sees the light and they light the other tower. It's relay. Yeah. So these communication systems, and also they're on the coast. So I think of the giant whales again and the idea of communication.
But are they whales or are they just giants? Come on.
Right? Exactly. Vapor canopy. But just look how beautiful these pieces are. Look at the glass.
I know.
And what we're told, this is hand chiseled.
Yeah, this is amazing stuff that's being done by, I mean, the hundreds of years that went into becoming glass carvers. I mean,
are they smooth or are they like indented like a record?
They're smooth, but they're polished smooth so that the light can refract. So there's also a reflection that happens on one angle.
Reflection and refraction. It's nutty physics. It's really nutty physics.
I mean, imagine, because the way you also had to do this was you'd have to get a math book out, and you'd have to get one of the Masonic compasses, and you have to draw all of the angles, and you'd have to measure how light refracts off each angle, and you'd have to have that in your book, and you'd have to build all of the sheets around that. So it's crazy the amount of geometry that goes into this. And you have to remember, you're also using a pretty dull light source at the time. So to make that light source thousands of times brighter, while also you lose an f-stop by every time the light shines through the glass, some of the glass absorbs some of the light. So to be able to reflect that much light to output more light is almost like a free energy problem.
You're right.
Indeed. Oh dear, we have lost Michelle. Oh, we got her back.
She's back.
So where was I? Where was I when you lost me?
Right beginning on Fresnel lenses and the good old
lighthouses and your theories about them. Yeah.
Lighthouses. So you just showed
that's the one you want. Okay.
One of the the house thing.
Okay, so let me go back a little bit because
and this also ties in a bit to the Captain and Mrs. Muir. Is that what it was called?
Oh yeah.
The old lighthouses.
So I was talking about these lighthouses. Was I on when I talked about the Woodcliff Pleasure Park?
I don't think we heard that one.
Okay, so I went.
You were talking about it was a ferry stop. There was a train stop as well.
Okay, so where I'm going with this is we had all these star forts up here, and we can't. Are
you sharing, Michelle? Because we can't.
Oh, I'm sorry. It. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Let's see here. Okay. So I showed the lighthouses up here, Kingston Amusement Park, Kingston, New York. So there's right in a series here, there were 3 historical amusement parks, trolley parks, that didn't last very long. And then we come to one in Poughkeepsie, and it's the same story. It was permanently closed in 1941. And then there was one in Orange Lake, which is just below Poughkeepsie. And, we're told it was a place where people could enjoy fishing, boating, swimming, walking. The trolley line came in 1886, increased the popularity of the park. And that it was developed by the president of a particular steamship company and trolley company. All kinds of amusements, roller skating rink, snack bars, Midway, Ferris wheel. And that it was forced to close for a couple of years during the Great Depression, but it was eventually dismantled in 1941 and turned into a residential community with nothing of the amusement park remaining. Typical story. And this is where I realized I wasn't with you anymore. So we've come to West Point on the Hudson River, where the military academy is. And there's 3 forts here. And what's interesting here is this is where the turn was located. And in our history, we're told that there was a 75-ton great chain constructed with the reason of preventing British naval vessels from sailing upriver during the Revolutionary War between 1776 and 1778. So they constructed a 75-ton chain during the American Revolutionary War, is what we're told.
Okay.
But to me, I think that was just a story to explain the existence of a rather large chain like that.
It's Old World Florida's done a lot of work on that. There's these big stone anchors down in Florida, so I'm just wondering if there's any connection there.
And I found another chain during the Revolution or during the Civil War around Kentucky, Ohio, that area. Again, it was part of the narrative that they constructed a chain to stop the Union, that kind of thing. But
Yeah,
sounds
from their foundries that they had.
Sounds pretty bogus to me. Okay, so more star forts here. You've got the Star Fort Bastion going here at Port Clinton, and that's another view. Oh, this is
wow.
Fort Putnam, and this is in West Point, and another Fort Constitution around West Point. Story. Okay, here's another park on the Hudson. This one has a merry-go-round, and those guys are kind of suspect too.
Yeah. And the trolley parks, most of them were built on water, weren't they? But they didn't have like water rides or anything, did they? They were just sort of.
They did. They had water rides.
They
had
did?
Rides.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Shoot the chutes, things like that.
Okay.
Okay. So there's a whole story around Bear Mountain Park in New York State that is rather interesting.
Is that name again?
There's a lot of disclosure. The who was behind it. Harriman, which big in the finance world. American financier Edward Henry Harriman, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Roosevelt. I mean, they all had their fingers in this place. Railroad. Okay, so I'm just looking through here, and again, I apologize. There's a lot of information in here, and I don't want to dally. Okay, so the Croton Reservoir is this ancient-looking reservoir in New York State. You can find the same things in Europe, and then you've got this beautiful bridge here in this area. This Indian Point Park became a nuclear power plant, so we're told while it operated. So that's this one here, Indian Point.
It was an amusement park, and they turned it into a nuclear power plant.
Right. Interesting, isn't it?
That's very interesting.
Raises my eyebrows.
Indeed. What did they find when they knocked it over, right?
Okay, so this is another place that is right across the river from the nuclear power plant that's been closed. It was permanently closed in 2021. Are you there?
Yep, we're still here.
Okay. So right across the river, it looks like another one of those harvested star forts here. So this is where the power plant was, and this is where that looks like it used to be a star fort. Okay. So there's a lighthouse I want to show you here at Stony Point, where there was supposed to have been a battle during the American Revolutionary War. So you have this nice big gate here made out of stones. Looks rather fancy. And you've got these big rocks that the reenactors are battling around. And that this place is said to have the oldest lighthouse on the Hudson River, built in 1826. But what's really interesting about this lighthouse is look at it. Looks like there's a lot more of it underneath the ground.
Oh wow!
Right?
Yeah,
Like, look at how buried that is. That's insane. That's like at least 2/3 got to be underground.
At least.
It's like the on Easter Islands there, the my same amount, like proportion almost buried. I'm
How do
sorry
they explain
though.
the point of that? It's not tall enough to be
I have
useful.
to run because it's I'm currently missing my mother-in-law's birthday dinner, so I'm gonna get murdered if I don't get there by the time that the food is coming up. But Zertis is here to fill the last half hour or 2 hours, however long you need, Michelle. Like this is so amazing. Like by all
This
means,
is fascinating. I'm
please,
just trying to be
please
quiet.
give
and
us
listen,
another
actually.
5 hours if you have it in you. But I will. I'll tune in a bit from my phone while being safe while driving, because I do not want to miss any of this. And I will see you again on Saturday, March 25th at noon with Paul Cook as well.
Exciting.
Confirmed, correct?
All right. We'll see you.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the dinner.
I'm already in trouble. They've been there for an hour.
Godspeed, Bernie.
I couldn't miss this.
This is like that scene in Mrs. Doubtfire, but you're not in a dress, so it could be better, it could be worse. Anyway, good luck. Good luck. I wanted to say though, Michelle, this is right up our alley, and I like that you're getting down to brass tacks on lighthouses and star forts because they're clearly connected. The amusement park, nuclear power plant, that is just exactly the kind of evidence that we've had suspicions about. So thank you for pointing that out. And just everywhere we go, when we look at these star forts, we're finding these amazing, both the lock and key pattern and the lighthouses. The lighthouses emerge everywhere. And I'm wondering, I guess I don't want to interrupt you because you're probably about to tell us what you think they're for beyond light, but keep going.
I want to show you this area. And so bear with me. I do have a conclusion that I will provide because it's just an absolutely fascinating area. And it's no wonder the controllers like flocked on New York in New York City. Clearly very powerful place. So I'm still going down the Hudson River here. We just passed by Stony Point. We're heading to Sleepy Hollow, where there's a lighthouse. And there's also a train line connection here. Amtrak's Empire Service and the freight today, they're still being used. And there's an old cantilever Tappan Zee Bridge. And, again, the bridges are original civilization too. So there's so much infrastructure to look into. The John D. Rockefeller Estate is also located here. So here's the Sleepy Hollow Lighthouse, and this is John D. Rockefeller's estate right here, right next to it. And so, like I said, they were definitely interested in it. It's the highest
people who
point.
sell oil, they sure love free energy.
Yeah, exactly. So we're coming into Manhattan, and you have Fort Tryon Park, Fort George, the George Washington Bridge, Bennett Park, where Fort Washington was. On the other side, you have Fort Lee Park, and then Palisades Park was also in this area. So that's another famous trolley park. And I go through and show these different locations and the connections with the railroad to this day, because that's all part of it. And another lighthouse in this area with a story behind it right next to the bridge. So you find lighthouses right next to bridges in a lot of places. And this is at Fort Washington. You've got, masonry kind of stuff there. It was the island's highest point near the north end of Manhattan. Here, this in this stone.
Right.
And then this was a historical diagram of Fort Washington. And this is where, we're kind of getting into where the historical narrative is just like full of it.
Well, I mean, they kind of tell you, right? They say they tore down the wall, and that's Wall Street. So, I mean, they're getting there.
So Fort Washington on the Manhattan side of the Hudson was said to have been constructed to prevent the British from going upriver, starting in June of 1776 by Pennsylvania battalions of the Continental Army for George Washington. So they're building on this side, and they also built Fort Lee during that same time. At the same time, concurrently built. But what's so ridiculous is that they did all of that hard work, and in November of that same year, troops under the command of the British General Howe and Hessian General Kniphausen made short work of the American forces stationed there, captured both the forts, and took a little over 2,800 American passengers, of which only around 800 were said to have survived after being kept in substandard conditions on board British ships in New York Harbor. Wow. So they built these two forts in short order, and then they lost the battle anyway.
And I mean, how long do they want us to think it takes to build a fort like that? I mean, it's got to take years, right?
It's just so ridiculous. I mean, of course, all these forts along the coast there they're supposed to be a century older than that, right? Also,
so I mean, to me, that's like the epitome of a ridiculous story.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
I just but I'm just amazed still at how many star forts are just popping up everywhere.
Right. You saw Fort Anne, right, in LiDAR. So there was an approach of forts that they used LiDAR recently, and they found that going from Canada, from the Hudson Bay down into New York, you can follow the forts. The weird part is there are more forts to the west than the east. So it doesn't really seem like, they started in the west from the British and they.
It comes the other way across.
They're coming from the west, as if they found themselves in Fortlands and then they took them over, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'll have a whole picture here by the time I'm done with this. So you've got another trolley park in this area, Fort George, that was said to have operated from 1895 to 1914. Pretty well developed thing, and you still have the same, kind of stories. It was built for the trolley line and wanted to give people a reason to use their trolley services on weekends and draw residents of Manhattan to the riverside for summer recreation.
It's crazy. 1894 is the same as 1994. These amusement parks and electric trolleys and lights on the streets at night.
So they had all kinds of things, rides, casinos, the Speedway, and the Speedways were part of this grid system, vaudeville shows. But then they had to close the park because the local residents were upset with all of the social problems that stemmed from the park. So they closed it.
Wow.
For public drunkenness and high crime.
Suspicious much?
And then there was a fire in 1911. They opened the park, but then I think there was another fire that devastated the park 2 years later, and so they finally condemned it. And then if you look, this is the Harlem River, and you see masonry banks here.
Yeah.
So, canal. They're all canals.
Moors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
what I believe.
Are electric parks the same as lunar parks? Do you find? Is there any difference, or is it the same?
I'll be giving an example that'll touch on that.
Epic. I really quickly want to ask you: do you connect beer gardens with these power plant amusement parks?
I haven't looked for beer gardens specifically, but given that they were selectively lowering our collective consciousness by providing all of this alcohol, and putting it into a context of having fun and all of this other stuff, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, to me, they just completely reverse engineered the energy grid system into a control system.
Yeah.
For the purposes of harvesting our energy and any available energy.
The quick example I was thinking of is because I'm from Santa Cruz, California. We have the boardwalk, which has got the oldest roller coaster, and we've got the oldest log ride. And you're like, wait a second, roller coaster. That looks like the gold rush carts in
Yeah,
Indiana
yeah, the
Jones.
mine carts.
Log
Yeah.
ride. Oh well, log ride in California. That's because they literally put logs on all these amusement park rides, so to speak. Using this energy, they're all based on the destruction of the West later on, right? These are these actual infrastructural tools that were being used, and we have a memory of when they were tearing things apart. Those are the rides.
And I do believe that these were built by the original civilization for good, for
For real,
collective
for
good.
actually for mining and actual purposes and for environment. Yes.
And for energy. I think it was part of the grid system, and these trolley parks possibly recharged it somehow, because they were always at the end of trolley lines. So and they were
Absolutely.
just restarted by the controllers and turned into a different. I mean, it was still for fun, but it was to make money. It was to they had their vaudeville shows and their casinos, and so they all just incorporated it into their gigantic money-making efforts and distraction efforts, so we wouldn't know what was happening
But
to us.
the money's why the story doesn't make sense. I mean, we're talking about they're trying to collect, trolley fare, right? Which would have been nothing.
Right. Well, but also
But
there's
then
the beer.
they have to build this big park up, right? And then they destroy it, and that's more expensive.
That's also the reason I found interesting the beer gardens, because a lot of these lower alcohol content earlier beers in the 18th century that were considered medicinal health drinks like Reinheitsgebot beers weren't as intense. And after the Prohibition, you see people putting, spirits in bicycle tires, and then that's how cocktails emerge. But they weren't drinking cocktails at that point, and they were kind of like kombucha. So you go to a place where there's a medicinal fermented carbonated drink, and you've got all sorts of recreational activities, and they're producing energy in the process, which is being used to make these light towers at the center of the town, which is illuminating the entire town. So no one's in the shadows. It's safer. I mean, it seems like it's a major part of the infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, there's places like Council Bluffs in Iowa that, if you look at historic pictures, they had what was called a moon tower in it back around the turn of the century, turn of the 20th century or whatever.
Pretty similar to Lighthouse, actually, the Fresnel lenses in the moon towers.
Yeah, and that they were taken down for some BS reason. Things like that.
Have a moon anymore.
It's interesting that there'd be a lighthouse essentially, but in the middle of a town, right? A moon tower is very interesting.
Yeah, and I would surmise that all of the infrastructure had some kind of relationship with, the sun and the moon and the elements, and just working harmoniously with each other, symbiotically. I think everything was perfectly aligned geometrically and on Earth and the heavens, and and I see it from ancient times to modern times. So I believe something happened relatively recently that totally destroyed everything.
Yeah.
Turned it upside down.
It's funny. So many people are comfortable with the idea of the apocalypse now. It just had to be 5,000 to 10,000 years ago. It's not allowed to have happened recently. We can't handle that, but they're getting closer.
And what's so interesting is that where I live in Arizona, I mean, you can just step outside the front door and just see the evidence. I mean, but people don't see it because of John Wayne and.
God, how far are you from the petrified forest in Arizona?
I'm probably 2 hours, something.
I mean,
like
it's
that.
just so crazy. It's not that far, and if you think about these giant trees and the idea that it's all there in Arizona, it's amazing. Even the name Arid Zone kind of sounds like Fallout after a nuclear attack, doesn't it?
Oh. And there's, the R sound, AR, Tartaria, Barbaria.
Right.
It's like the Aryans. I think the Aryans are the same.
Yeah.
And,
nobility rate.
And when the whole Nazi thing came in, it's like after they destroyed the original civilization, they wanted to create their own version of Superman. When when humanity was already there.
Well, the Ashkenazi, Anastasi. Wow, 20 Freudian slip. The Anastasi, are they in Arizona? Right? They were
the
before
ancient
they disappeared.
Right. But again,
and they have locust gods, Kokopelli. They have the idea of insectoid super soldiers that are living underground. So.
and again, when you talk about the ancient ones, from what I know, they're still with us. They're ancient humans still alive today, and those would be the Moors. And so they want to put everything way far back, but in reality, they've gone after the original humans that have a strong connection with the creator and tried to replace humanity with this version of them.
Right. Ancient is very recent because ancient is just prehistory. I mean, realistically, CNN isn't history. We don't know what happened yesterday, let alone 400 years ago. Not honestly.
And just for example, where I live, I mean, there's a crazy amount of water groundwater underneath the surface. Crazy amount. But it's called the Sinagua people that were here because when you look at the landscape, it looks dry and, we do get rain here, but it's not like all the time. But so they tell us it's Sinagua and that something happened to the Anasazi. But there's plenty of water here.
Right. No, the disappearance of the Anastasi's one of the craziest stories. When you look at some of the other nations that existed in the Western Hemisphere at the same time, they all, like the Quechua, the Lakota, they all have stories, the Hopi, about going underground. And some of the stories I'd heard as a kid, like I think the History Channel or Sci-Fi, were like, did the Anastasi leave in a flying saucer? This is way before Ancient Aliens. They were trying to make it seem crazy. But seriously, the idea that they went underground to survive some sort of a disaster, or they left that architectural monument to go elsewhere, I don't know where else they would go unless they got on. I mean, it just seems more likely that they went underground for a century like the Quechua did.
Yeah, I think it's all important to take that into consideration. The Hopi have an emergence legend of coming out of the Sipapu in the Grand Canyon.
Right.
And, going underground and being taken care of by the ant people. And of course, they're ancient people too. So what I remember a long time ago before I started my own journey is that, and it might have been a book I read, in the 1990s. I started looking for information. And what I remember that really struck me is that the Hopi said that the new civilization was built on top of the old. And I didn't really have any idea at that time what that could have possibly meant. But now I do. So did they go underground when this took place? And I think that probably happened for a lot of ancient people that they went
Not trying to
underground.
share that screen necessarily, but that my first thought was Gondahar. I'm sorry. I don't know if you ever saw that movie. Have you ever seen Gondahar?
No.
So have you ever seen Fantastic Planet, the French cartoon with the blue aliens? The guy made Gondahar. Gondahar starts out by saying, in the future, we won't be able to stop it because it already happened and the past couldn't have happened without the future. I'm kind of paraphrasing. But this has been the push I've seen recently. Dave Chappelle, the astronauts from NASA, talking about UFOs are really time traveling us. It's just us in the future. And that some of these insectoids, well, those are probably genetically modified human super soldiers from, China or the United States military in the future. And they're living underground in the past because if they were to live in the surface, it would affect the butterfly effect. So underground, then if there's a natural disaster, they might be able to raise our ancient people up for this coming reset, which sounds kind of crazy, but also reminds me of Cynthia Sue Larson and the Mandela effect and the linear accelerator and a lot of the work that China, the United States, the Soviet Union, Switzerland have put into controlling causality, that we might actually be connected to the past and the future. And this idea of alien might actually just be us in some other respect. Might be far off, but I was thinking Gandahar because he said that.
Yeah. I just think it's important to consider all possibilities because as crazy as different things sound, it's not nearly as crazy as what's happened here.
And definitely not nearly as crazy as what they try to teach. What they try to teach in school is definitely crazier. Right, exactly.
So give it your best shot. So I'll just quicken this up. So there's another star fort here. It had Roosevelt fingerprints over what happened to it. yeah, so they're involved in different things going on. There's another Palisades Park here, very famous. Bruce Springsteen popularized it in a song, I believe. And this was a really popular park. And you see the trolley cars down at the bottom, and then they go on up to the top.
It's called Palisades Park. It's weird to me. They keep renaming places Palisades. So like Squaw Valley, you're not allowed to. This sounds racist. So now they're going to call it Palisades. Palisades is renamed about 4 of the recently renamed cities that I can think of, or colleges.
You know, it's the biggest cover up there is. You know, forget aliens, forget flat Earth. You know, what has happened, that doesn't even begin to cover the lies that we've been told.
Do you know what a
And
palisade
so-
is, actually? A palisade is a
Moor,
paling or
yeah.
a stake wall or a moor. Exactly, a wall.
Yeah, it's
Or a more interesting.
yeah, it's the Moors are the biggest cover up. But anyway, So-
I agree.
so anyway, I built on some other research that I did and that I incorporated in here. Most people know by now that the Statue of Liberty is on the Star Fort, and the Statue of Liberty is also a lighthouse. Worked as a
Yes.
lighthouse for a while between 1886 and 1901, and you can see this solar alignment with the torch.
It's interesting because when I first jumped in, you were talking about lighthouses. My first thought was the Colossus of Rhodes, right? Because the Colossus of Rhodes serves as a lighthouse as well.
It's on an artificial island. Lots of those around. But I'll cut to the chase here. Hang on. Lots here. This is on my website. If you want to go back and look at it, Star Forts, Gone By Trolley Parks and Lighthouses of New York's Hudson River Valley and New York Bays. It's also on my YouTube channel. Okay, what do I think? I think lighthouses are the distribution of the energy. I think they're the
Interesting.
distribution system.
Okay, so wireless sort of beaming it from point to point kind of thing.
I'm going to show you another picture. Hopefully, let's see. I get all confused. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And then I'm going to present. Try to figure out where my picture is.
Mhm.
Let's see. Let's see. I don't know if this is it. No. I'm not used to this one.
That's all right.
I've got a picture on my desktop of a lighthouse in Turkey where the light is just a very powerful. Let me find it. I think I can do it here.
And then we have like the Eiffel Tower.
Do you remember where it is in Turkey? If it's the Alanya Lighthouse or an older one?
No. Shoot.
Alanya.
Maybe I can find it that way. It's the Turku. It's a particular picture of the Turgutreis Lighthouse. So it's Turgutreis Lighthouse, and it's a particular picture. It like showed up on my feed, and then I went. Okay, so there's one. There's one here where it shows, but there's another one where there's just light just coming out of it.
Oh, so it's like almost that one. So the sun's shining through its
It's similar, but it's even more dramatic than that.
And so these are okay. So there's solar alignments as well.
So there's solar alignments. That is, very typical. Maybe video file is what I'm looking for. I'll find it, guys.
And see.
Definitely there's something to this because I remember when BurnEye had, who was it who builds lasers on our channel?
Jeremiah and his friend at the laser shop.
Right, his friend is the name I can remember. But yeah, I mean, awesome guy building lasers. A lot of the time, you'll use lenses in
It was
order
our
to
New
divide
Year's
light.
stream.
It looks like a horizontal laser and a vertical laser from that particular lighthouse in Turkey. And
okay, so oh wow, okay, so if it's if they're all in solar alignments and all linked up, do you think that there was at certain times and events during the year that would shine through, the sun would go through one of the lenses and then you'd have like this instant kind of information grid turn on, wouldn't you?
Something along those lines. They were in alignment with each other.
It's wow.
And
because I mean,
this is
that they tell us they've got everyone thinking that sun worship is bad. I mean, but look at this, right? Clearly, it's all based on the sun, right? How the sun.
I feel like
gets
it's
bad,
sun and moon, though, right? Sun and the problem is when I think the problem is when they think it's one or the other, and really it's not. Like it's one's good and the other's evil. It's that you need both in order to have the order of the day and the night.
It was sun and moon, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Right.
they definitely had a festival at the winter solstice too.
There was the last comment that you had. The last comment that you had fit it. What I think it was they were part of the energy distribution system, and it was way more as navigational aid. I think they were transmitting all the energy that was generated by the star forts and the trolley parks and so forth, and just nothing like what we're told. So if we go back to what I found, so between the entrance to the lower New York Bay at the Atlantic Ocean to the locations around the George Washington Bridge across the Hudson River, I specifically looked at 11 star forts that are in pairs or clusters, 5 major historic trolley amusement parks, and 11 lighthouses. And that was just from here to here. And remember, I started way north of there. This is, once you get into Manhattan, and I was showing you further upriver, and you saw the lighthouses and the star forts and the electric parks. So to me, this was like a major spot on the Earth's grid system. And then if you look at San Francisco, you find a lot of the same characteristics with lighthouses and bridges.
All the way to Monterey, right?
There's a lot that down near sort of Texas, Galveston, going up through whatever that river port thing is, inlet. Right.
So I just invite people to kind of look some of this stuff up on my website and my YouTube channel, because a lot of times I'll go into a place with no, expectations of what I'm going to find, and then when I start doing the research, all this other stuff comes out. And it's like when you put your attention on something, it's like the information wants to come back. And so kind of poking around these types of topics is yielding a lot of information, because it's not hard to start poking holes in the narrative about what they tell us, and to see the interconnections between all of this infrastructure and the lighthouses line up with each other and things like that. So I think they're, it's all part of an interconnected system, and it was all over the Earth, and it was all part of generating free energy. And I kind of see Earth as a grand central station of the universe, and that I think it went beyond here. I think it was benefiting everywhere. That's just speculation on my part, but
I agree with that. I resonate with that.
Nucleus. Wow.
So
maybe that's what
evil came in and crashed the party. And so we want that. This is our chance.
Yeah. I mean, it was a takeover. And I was just thinking before, isn't it interesting that that's such a part of our culture that we've been brought up with, is all these alien invasion stuff, I mean, is that even normal for a civilization to think about? Like, where did that come from? And it's probably because it's already happened, right? But of course, they always show us the ways that it happens is not, you know, they didn't come in, well, they probably did come in guns a-blazing, but, you know, they love to hide in the shadows with their control, right? They're not out the front saying, woohoo, we're controlling you, because that clearly wouldn't work, I guess. There we go. You got any comments on this situation, Mr. Zertus?
I mean, I want to go back and watch a lot of Michelle's videos, and I want to also think about, there's a guy who does these old amusement park videos, lost amusement parks or amusement parks that fell apart. And he did some videos about 19th century amusement parks and beer gardens. And I want to compare some of my thoughts on the destruction of these families, you know, because a lot of these guys had a beer garden, and then there was something that happened where their family was destroyed and the entire town was taken over by a specific group, usually the Carnegies or Rockefellers. So I wonder about that. It feels like the way the CIA used Pinochet or Noriega or Saddam Hussein, like, you go in there and kill a bunch of people and we'll come in and kill you when everything's all settled, you know? And so I wonder about the transitionary period of these free energy towers and the way that for a while it seems like people were still trying to hold on and use them after whatever it seems like happened. Because it does seem like there's some sort of an end to the harmony. And I agree with Michelle that there was some sort of natural or even synthetically assisted harmony through our community. I've done some interviews with people talking about Reiki and technology, building cloud busting machines, and they've talked about how the emotionality of the community where that cloud busting machine is set up can affect the cloud busting machine. And I think that that's another interesting thing about amusement parks. That's something, you know, to consider is human emotion, the magnetism of thoughts or the field of EMF of thoughts. How are we affecting each other? And how can we maybe make, through sociological control, a society more healthy? I mean, that sounds kind of like what a pyramid is. And when we say pyramid, we have to remember also a pyramid and a lighthouse are etymologically the same thing. There's light on the inside of the pyre is on the inside of this edifice. So there's a lot more connection here than I think we even realize, and we have to keep digging further. But it's amazing stuff. And Michelle, I love that so much of everything that you have is cited. You've got evidence to all the things you're talking about, and you are very coy to tell us your hypothesis until you've shown us all of your data, and that's amazing. So I appreciate that.
Well said.
And of course, I just showed you, kind of skipped over a lot of parts, but I have a very detail-oriented mind.
Right.
So even when I want to hurry through something, you know, I can't.
No, I mean, the point is you have the data, and if anything, if anyone feels like they need more, you can go to Michelle's channel. You can see there's actually a lot of videos about these subjects, and they're broken up into different videos. So it's actually pretty convenient to start studying these things and to ask these questions and to research them yourself. But I also appreciate your effort to say, look, to suffice it to say, here's what I'm looking at right now. Here's what I'm working on. It's a great taste into your world. So I appreciate that.
And also piercingtheveilofillusion.com.
Right.
Did BurnEye, the late mum-in-law's birthday dinner, have something to say? Driving wildly down the road, try to not get in trouble. No, these.
You better be careful, because you know how there's snow on those roads and salt on that snow. I know how it works.
Yes.
We actually have a Chinook right now, which is rare. That I guess winter's almost over, but it's still technically winter. But it became plus.
Did you call it a Chinooker? What's a Chinooker? That's a whole. That sounds dirty.
Yeah, it sounds like someone who walks down the street and charges you money for different weather or something.
Yeah, right. Canadians are all like that, though. They'll always be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry about the weather," and I'm like, "Did you forget to pay for the heat? Like, what do you mean you're sorry?"
Canada? Yeah. Anyway, all right, so we've hit 2 hours and 10 minutes, so thank you very much for your time, Michelle. As was mentioned before, there's going to be a chat between Michelle and Paul this next Saturday, is that right? Not this coming Saturday, but the next one, I think.
25th.
25th, there we go, so keep your eye out for that. Thanks for coming in, Andreas.
Thanks for
running away, Bernie. And thank you to everyone in the chat and to everyone who donated and supported with donations, and everyone who didn't, we support. We love you as well. So jump over, check out Michelle's work, give her a subscribe, a like, all that good stuff. And thanks again, guys. And we will catch you all on the next upload.
Or on
Bye for
OnlyCams.
now. Hang on. What was that? No. All right.
Only on
I'm going.
OnlyCams.
Yes, exactly. Ciao for now.
All right, good night, everybody.